We're going to look at properties of data. We're talking about databases, and obviously data is fundamental in databases. So let's look at some properties that data needs to have or can have if we talk about databases. So one piece of terminology is metadata. What is metadata? This is actually data that we use to describe other data. Let's look at an example so we can understand this better. For example, if we have some data, it might be interesting to know why did we create this data? Or what is the purpose of this data? Where does this data come from? What is the time and date that we created this data, and who is the author of this data? And where was it created and where is it stored? And what were the standards used to encode this data or create this data? This is all data at meta level of the data that we're creating. And that's why it's called metadata. Other important things about data is data integrity. Data integrity means that the data that is stored in the database is up to date, it's available for people that need it, and it's consistent. And consistency means that the same value for a particular piece of data appears in different places of the database. Because sometimes, as we will see later on, data is being repeated. And if data is being repeated, we have to make sure that the same data is repeated. If I am in some kind of database and my telephone number is in one table and it's also in another table, it might as well be the same number, because otherwise the data is not consistent. Data corruption and data loss are the opposite of integrity and things that we need to prevent if we have a database. Data corruption refers to incorrect data. So errors have crept in, for example, when we have been writing, reading, storing, transferring or processing data. And some errors have crept in and our data is now not correct anymore. It is corrupted. Another thing that we need to prevent is data loss. That we actually destroy data that can be very valuable because we have failed to do some serious backup and recovery procedures to make sure that we can always restore the data. So, data corruption and data loss, the opposite of integrity. Then we have data security and data privacy. Data security is the things we need to do to protect our data against unauthorized access and modification. We have to make sure that our data is secured by a password or by more stronger data security techniques, to make sure that people that cannot or are not allowed to see the data cannot see it. And this is very closely linked to data privacy. Data privacy are those policies that determine who can see the data and what part of the data can be seen by which people. And how can the data be used? Maybe sometimes you can see the data, but you cannot use it for specific purposes. So these two concepts are data privacy and data security. Another terminology related to data is data redundancy. So as I already indicated before, sometimes storing the same data is needed in different locations of a database. This is, for example, being done to improve the performance of database queries. Yeah, you can so shorten the database response time because data is available in more places and maybe it's more near to where you were already looking, so you can just include it in the response and be faster. So it's good to be fast, but the disadvantages are that you complicate data management and you introduce this risk of data inconsistency, because since data is repeated, data inconsistency can also creep in. So you have to make sure that this data is always consistent. And also, evidently, replicating data also increases the required amount of storage. So data redundancy can increase speed, but we have to reduce it to a minimum. So we've seen some terminology and concepts related to data. In the next part, we'll look at database management systems.